It's day 44 of Hamas's war against Israel, with breaking news revelations from Gaza's Shifa hospital. We'll have a live briefing from the IDF, then go to Azerbaijan to hear from Arab-Israeli Ambassador George Deek, before our Stand With Us panel analyzes the campus and legal fight against anti-Semitism. I'm Michael Dixon, and this is Stand With Us TV Live. Shalom, and thank you for joining us once again for our weekly briefing. This is week 7, where we break down the war with Hamas and its global fallout. We have a packed briefing for you today from multiple front lines. First, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus will brief us on the military front line. Then we'll go to Baku, Azerbaijan to discuss the diplomatic front line with Ambassador George Deek. And finally, Stand With Us' Yael Lerman and Rena Nasar-First will address the campus and communal front lines. And we'll end with some of the sights and sounds of the largest pro-Israel rally in American history, this week's March for Israel. Stay with us. We're streaming live to Stand With Us social media platforms as well as YouTube, and you can listen to this and all previous briefings as a podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Over 400,000 of you watched our last briefing with clips on Stand With Us digital platforms reaching millions. Some updates on the war now. This week saw major escalations in the north of Israel, with 1 murdered and civilians injured, and soldiers, after Hezbollah terrorists fired anti-tank missiles from southern Lebanon every day of this week. In Gaza, the IDF uncovered a Hamas terrorist hideout in the basement of Rantisi Hospital, and they extracted the body of Yehudit Weiss, who was kidnapped from her home in Kibbutz Be'eri. There's further breaking news out of Shifa Hospital, and we'll discuss that with the IDF spokesperson in just a moment. So far, the IDF has released the names of 65 Israeli soldiers, heroes, who were killed in action in Gaza. Israeli security forces revealed that a kidnapped pregnant woman who was dragged into Gaza by Hamas terrorists on October the 7th gave birth in captivity. Her condition and the condition of the baby are unknown. And on Thursday, there was a Hamas terror shooting attack in the Jerusalem area. 1 IDF soldier was murdered and 6 injured. It is believed that the terror cell was planning a major attack in Jerusalem, which was thwarted. And rocket bombardment from Gaza continued this week, including towards Israel's center and south. The Iron Dome achieved over 90% interceptions. Several people were injured from shrapnel, including a nurse who finished her shift in Tel Aviv. 1 person was critically injured. Those rocket launches included on Friday night when I was walking with my family from synagogue to Friday night dinner. We took cover, as did many, many people all over the country. And a look at the picture in Israel in numbers. Over 9,500 rockets have been fired so far from Gaza. 1,200 people confirmed murdered. Over 7,000 are injured, and around 200,000 Israelis are still displaced. 236 people are currently kidnapped in Gaza. 40 of them are children and babies. They've been held against their will now for 5 weeks. Intolerable. Let's go now to the military front line of the fight against Hamas. Joining us live is the IDF International Spokesperson, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. Good to have you with us once again, Lieutenant Colonel. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Michael. A pleasure as always.
And as we go live, we have breaking news. The IDF showing video of a terror tunnel right underneath Shifa Hospital, and video showing hostages being taken into the hospital, with the revelation that 19-year-old Noah Marciano was murdered inside the hospital. You yourself were in Gaza this week. Please tell us more.
Yeah, I think that what the IDF is doing, the chief IDF spokesperson, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, showed Israeli TV today and the world, those who are willing to listen, that we are peeling away layer after layer of Hamas lies and deceit. And for those brave enough to listen and look at the proof that we are providing, they will accept the fact that in fact that Hamas has been using the Shifa hospital and other hospitals, but we're focusing on Shifa now, not only as a military base, and not only is there infrastructure underneath Shifa, which is very important for Hamas, but that they also used Shifa and its facilities, including its medical facilities, in order to hide, maybe treat, but definitely hide Israeli hostages that were taken on the 7th of October, including armed Hamas combatants who went straight from Israel with abducted Israelis into the hospital, including with vehicles that were taken from Israel, Israeli military vehicles and other vehicles, and including, and most importantly, civilians that were taken from Israel. And what we expose today is totally on par and in order with what we've been claiming all along. Shifa was used by Hamas as a military facility, that there is significant military infrastructure underneath Shifa, which we are now beginning to expose, and we will show proof, all in good time, of the claims that we make. Today we made one step forward, but there are many more steps to be done. And at the end of this fight, not only will our words be proven to be true, and all of those who try to belittle and diminish and question whatever we say will have to eat their hat if they're brave enough and honest enough to do so and admit that we were right and they were wrong. But we will expose all of Hamas lies, and most importantly, that Hamas cynically uses hospitals, UN facilities, schools, mosques, churches, and everything else that is supposed to be protected and off the battlefield. They use it for their military purposes, and Shifa is perhaps the biggest and most despicable example of those horrible practices.
And we can actually look at video released just in the last few hours of the tunnels found under Shifa Hospital. Take a look.
So what we're seeing in this tunnel, this is an aerial view of the hospital area. On the right, that's the border of the compound. And now the camera is kind of zooming in into a pier, a shaft that was exposed. The little red, on the lower right side of the screen, you can see where the camera is relative to the shaft and the tunnel itself. So we're just now going down the horizontal shaft. You can see that we're going down spiraling cases, a spiral case, steps that we're going down, and soon we will be at the bottom of that staircase. As you can see, it's a big staircase. This isn't just for one or two guys, the small tunnel. This is for a lot of people to be able to go up and down. This isn't a small thing, but a very substantial piece of network that we just uncovered. Actually, we uncovered it two days ago, and we are going through and analyzing what we're seeing. But as you can see, very sturdy infrastructure and equipment here. And as our camera will go down, even further down, what we will see, now we're at the end of the staircase. You can see on the lower right hand, you can see that we're at the end of the staircase. And now the camera will go inside another piece of the tunnel. We'll be going slightly upwards, and then we'll take a left turn, and then we'll be going downwards. Now you see we're going downwards, and we'll be making about 50 meters travel. You can see this is a very well-equipped tunnel. It's cement on both sides, and with the canopy above, there's electricity and other wiring that goes into the tunnel. And at the end of these 15 meters, what we're going to see is a blast-proof door, which has an opening in order to fire from within. And this is a blast-proof door that is very important and really part of standard Hamas infrastructure. Now, what we're showing isn't the most advanced part that we know. We're showing things that we are comfortable in showing from an operational point of view. There's much more to see. There will be much more to see, and we will expose more of Hamas infrastructure under Shifa, how important their infrastructure is, and most importantly, the fact that when we said weeks ago that Hamas uses Shifa compound as a military base, we were right, and we are going to prove it.
Absolutely. And we've made all the publicly released materials available all across Stand With Us social media. Please do share them, share the truth so that people can see them. And they've obviously hit the headlines across international media. We've seen that in the last hour or so. All the time, of course, given the fact that Hamas cynically uses the hospital site, Israel has to try to minimize the effects of the conflict at the same time as fighting the Hamas terrorists. So how do they do that, and how have they been doing that with the hospital?
Yeah, I was on the ground. I had the honor of spending about 40 hours with some of the best of the soldiers in the IDF, with the elite Shaldag unit, the best of the Israeli Air Force, their elite unit. I was on the ground with them, and they helped me get inside, and they were the ones who uncovered the early proof that we found in the MRI center, the weapons, the grab bags, the grenades, and they were the ones who exposed the communication center that they found in one of the basements, and they are the ones who are exposing the other part of the infrastructure together with other soldiers. Now, parallel to that, to our soldiers searching for Hamas infrastructure that was used in order to conduct fighting against Israel and to take the hostages, parallel to that, we are taking care of the humanitarian needs of the civilians in the hospital. Again, we've said they aren't our enemy. They may not all be very good people, but they are people who are in a hospital and as such are protected under international law, and we fight according to international law. So what we've been doing is providing incubators for the babies. We have provided food. We have provided water, fuel, even fuel to the hospital. And we have also facilitated the safe passage of babies inside incubators from Shifa, which is in the middle of a combat zone, south to other parts of Gaza in order to leave the Gaza Strip towards Egypt. And that is, of course, also parallel to the fact that we are continue to allow Gazan civilians to safely leave the area of northern Gaza. Those that are still unwise enough to stay in northern Gaza, we're still allowing them to move south. All of those actions out of a sanctity of human life, a respect for international military law of armed conduct. And we're doing it because we know that it's the right thing to do, not because it serves our tactical purposes. It would be much easier to be more heavy-handed, but that is not how we fight, and those are not our values.
And this has all been taking place in the north of Gaza. Of course, Hamas terrorists have almost certainly fled south, a lot of them. And so what do we anticipate will happen next in the next stages of this conflict?
Yeah, so Israeli soldiers there's still significant fighting in the north. Many terrorists, we assume, have fled south, put down their weapons and hide like cowards among the civilians, among the women and children and elderly that are leaving. This is typical behavior of terrorists, of Hamas cowards. But some are staying behind and fighting in their compounds in Zaytun and in Jabalia and in other areas. Unfortunately, Israel has casualties, and I was at the funeral today of one of those casualties up in Pki'in, a major from the paratroopers who was a company commander. He was the son of a friend of mine, a colonel in the IDF, and it was terribly sad. All of the funerals and all of the losses are extremely sad for the families and for the entire people of Israel. But I can tell you that it was a very respectable and noble event of a very noble family. And I'm sure that all of our hearts go out to the bereaved families of these slain Israeli heroes that are defending the state of Israel and defending everything that is right. The next stage of the fighting will be to finish up what is left of Hamas in northern Gaza, which isn't easy business and shouldn't be looked as if we're brushing aside. No, this is still significant fighting ongoing in northern Gaza, but that will be finished, hopefully sooner rather than later, and hopefully without additional Israeli casualties. Once that is done, then of course we will have to go on to the next stage of fighting, because the overall aim is to dismantle all of Hamas infrastructure. And we never limited ourselves to any geographical area. We simply said that we are going to fight first in the northern part of Gaza, but the overall aim of the war remains the same. We are going to return security to the state of Israel by dismantling all of Hamas military infrastructure, by killing their seniors, and by either having them surrender, the rank and file having them surrender, or die inside their tunnels. It's very simple. So I won't get ahead of ourselves, and I won't say when and where and what we're going to do, but the aim of the operation remains the same, and the IDF is very focused on getting that done. The Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Halevi, approved plans today for the next stage of operations, and the IDF is ready, capable, and eager to continue to implement our mission.
And we wish you every success with that. Thank you so much for once again being with us, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Our next guest was born in Jaffa and rose to become one of the most prominent Israeli Arab diplomats, currently serving as Israeli ambassador to Azerbaijan. Please welcome Ambassador George Deek. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Michael, for having me with you.
First of all, before we proceed, I understand there was an attempted infiltration and attack on your embassy by an Iranian. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, we don't usually comment on security issues, but I can tell you that it's an attempt that was published in the media, as was another attempt about a month or two ago by an Afghani citizen who came to Azerbaijan through Iran. And that's, we are at war. So this is how it is at war. There is the army that is fighting for territory back home, and we are here fighting for time, diplomatic time, in the diplomatic front, as StandWithUs is doing as well.
And we wish you and all the diplomats around the world safety as we move ahead. And obviously the long arm of Iran threatening there, as they did by the Houthi attack we saw today on the seas. Maybe we'll get to that in a moment. A lot to discuss. Before we do, your personal story is fascinating. And I wonder if before we move forward, if you would just share your family story with viewers who may not know it.
Well, I'm from an Arab Christian family in Jaffa. In the 1948 Independence War, my family and my grandparents have fled together with the rest of their family to Lebanon. About a year later, they came back by themselves, leaving everyone else behind. Long story short, they came to a devastated town alone with no relatives whatsoever. And by themselves, they chose to live among those who were supposed to be their enemies when everyone else thought they were completely insane, and to make the Jewish people their friends. So since then, we've been living in the city of Jaffa, where my family is originally also from, for the last 380-something years. I grew up there. My father was an accountant, and I'm a lawyer by profession. And one day I saw an ad in the newspaper saying that of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, that there is a Kurs Tsarim, the cadets training. And suddenly I became a diplomat after a year of tests. I joined the service in 2008. I served in Nigeria for 3 years. I served in Norway for 3 years. I spent 2 years in the US doing my master's at Georgetown. I've been in Azerbaijan as an ambassador, my first posting as an ambassador and head of mission. I've been here since 2019.
And serving us very proudly, and we appreciate all of your service. And there's a town square, I believe, named after your father in Jaffa.
That's right. My father was the head of the Arab Christian community in Jaffa, and later also in Israel for a few years. He did a lot of good for his community, for his people. And I'm happy that the people of the city of Tel Aviv and Jaffa appreciated his hard work throughout the years. Unfortunately, he passed away, but luckily he was able to see me become a diplomat. He passed away exactly a year afterwards. So at least, I know he was proud of me then.
I'm sure. Let's turn to the diplomatic front of this war. So what are we to make of the response by the UN and by some democratic countries following not just the October 7th massacre, but particularly following Israel's fight against Hamas?
I think right now we are seeing, in a big picture, we're seeing two kinds of battles. There's the battle over the soul of the free world, and there's the battle over the soul of the Middle East. the UN and the other countries that have reacted, both in the West and other places, are in fact undermining the free world that we have lived, we have worked in our world so hard to establish. Reagan once said that our freedom is at risk always one generation away. It's enough for one generation to destroy the freedom that we have worked on. And unfortunately, we are seeing too many voices in the free world, both by people like the UN Secretary General and others, who are undermining the free world and what the values that we have been establishing our countries upon. And when you see cases that, as Jonathan Conricus before me have said about the hospital, we know that the ICRC was at the hospital. We know that the WHO, the World Health Organization, was at Al-Shifa. They visited Al-Shifa, they were there. Everyone knew, you could see in the videos that we saw today, that the medical staff was standing there while the hostages were carried in. And that raises a question. Where is the UN? Where's the UN in protecting the truth? Where is the UN in fighting for the right of our hostages to live safely with their families in Israel? What does it say about the role of the international community, if there is such a community, when it comes to upholding its values and protecting every country and the citizens of every country from such atrocities? So this fight is being fought today, both on the diplomatic arena by diplomats, but also in the public arena. And I know StandWithUs and other organizations are fighting that battle hard. We see it on campuses and elsewhere. And I think it's one of a big battle over the soul of maybe the West, but not just the West, I think the free world in general.
And one that will continue to fight. You tweeted today about the Palestinian Authority's response, President Abbas's response to October the 7th. Tell us more.
You know, I've been outraged by the response by the Palestinian Authority, not just today by Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the PA, but even here, the Palestinian ambassador once said in an interview here in Baku, he said that what happened on October 7 was Israel tasting its own recipe. And the Palestinian Authority refused to condemn the horrendous massacre that took place, and the raping and the taking hostage, the kidnapping of Israelis on the October 7th. And that unfortunately says a lot about the culture of hate that has been built throughout the Palestinian territories. You know, the UN Secretary General said in his infamous speech that what Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. And I think he's right. It did not happen in a vacuum. It happened in a culture that glorifies terrorism, that glorifies death. You go to the West Bank today, the biggest football stadiums and the most luxurious places are named after terrorists, from Dalal Mughrabi to others. Hamas terrorists, by the way, I'm not sure people know this, but Hamas terrorists that committed the 7th of October massacre are going to receive pension from the Palestinian Authority in this pensions or pay for slay, as it's called, scheme. And unfortunately, that says a lot about the nature of the Palestinian Authority. I'm a man of peace, and I hope that one day we will have peace between Israel and the Palestinians. But peace means not only taking out the weapons and the military capabilities of Hamas, but it also means uprooting the hatred and the culture of violence and rejection of the state of Israel. The root cause of the conflict is not the occupation or what have you. The root of the conflict is the fact that, unfortunately, up to this day, the Palestinian leadership refuses to accept that the Jewish people are native to the land and have an equal right to self-determination and have a state on their homeland. And that, I think, is the beginning of all evils that has brought us to what Hamas has done. It did not happen in vacuum. It happened in the height of a culture of death and a culture of hate that has culminated into this moment.
And Hamas has repeatedly called on Arabs within Israel, in addition to Palestinians in Judea and Samaria and the West Bank, to support them. How have Israeli Arabs responded to that call?
Maybe I'm biased, but for me, this is one of the most, if not the most fascinating dynamics that is taking place. You know, Hamas has been calling for the Arabs, as you said, to join the fight, both in the West Bank, but also the Arabs inside Israel. And we see something amazing. 75% of the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza together celebrate and support what Hamas did on October 7th. But you look in Israel, and according to the Machon Israeli Ledemokratia, the Israeli democracy institution, 70% of the Arabs in Israel identify with the country. 70%, that's a record number since they started recording or asking that questions in 2003, over 20 years ago. So we see an opposite trend. You see Hamas calling Arabs to join the fight, but Israeli Arab leaders, including of the joint list even, are telling people do not join and condemning the Hamas calls. You see the leaders of the Arab parties, you see political leaders from Mansour Abbas to others who are watching the horror videos by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, coming out in tears and saying this does not represent us, this is not who we are, and fighting against any calls calling for violence. And the result is that we have zero clashes between the Arab society in Israel and the police. And we have even initiatives from within the Arab public to help and assist the country, whether through civilian initiatives or others, in this struggle. We have the Hamal Arabi Yehudi in the Negev desert. We have football teams like Al-Fahim and Kfar Qasim, two Arab football teams, without anyone asking them to, hold a minute of silence to the memory of the victims of the massacre of October 7th. And there's something that facilitated that change. I think when what we saw, that Hamas is carrying out an attack in an ISIS style, I think that pushed a lot of us away, a lot of the Arab sector. And also that it has killed and kidnapped Arabs, even those we have seen videos, those who identified as Arabs and Muslims even, and they came to them. And they kidnapped them. There is a woman in a hijab kidnapped in Gaza as we speak. And let's not forget the many brave Bedouins and others who have saved so many lives that day by rescuing people from the Nova party and other places. So I think what we're seeing is something dramatic. I cannot overstate how dramatic it is that Arab Israelis are feeling more Israeli than ever.
So important. And obviously, this is a tough time for all of Israel's citizens, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, and otherwise. But we've been through tough times before. So what are your thoughts on how eventually Israel moves forward after this?
First of all, we have to win the war. Winning the war means the goals that we know, releasing the hostages, destroying Hamas, both militarily and as a government, and trying to build a better future for the people in Gaza and the people in Israel, where we in Israel will not be under the threat of rockets for the long term. But I think on the long term, something has changed in Israeli society. I don't think the Israel, and I'm speaking now more as a citizen than an ambassador, I don't think Israel of the 6th of October and Israel of the 8th of October are the same country. Something dramatic has changed in the dynamics. We are more united. We are suddenly put in proportions all the things that push us apart, but also there's an opportunity to reinvent and redefine what does it mean to be an Israeli. We see the sacrifice being put by the Druze community in Israel. We see the sacrifice by the Haredi community in Israel that is joining the army en masse. We see the effort of the Arab society to integrate. And that really is a window of opportunity to create something more unifying between all parts of public, secular, religious, Arabs, Jews, periphery, and center. And I think this is truly a unique moment in our history. Unfortunately, on the other side, if I may, on the Palestinian side, we have seen a different kind of dynamic. In the 48 war, which the Arab world has launched against Israel, which led to my grandparents leaving the country and my family being dispersed all over the planet, brought us the disaster to the Palestinians. 67 brought, after they launched the war again, brought the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. And then the second Intifada, it brought the disintegration of the Palestinian society into three parts: West Bank, Gaza, and the Arabs in Israel. And I think this war is going to bring another catastrophe to the Palestinian society, unfortunately. But in Israel, we see an opposite trend. And I think that this war is going to be another stage of defining what is Zionism, what does it mean on the broader term. And I think we are going to see a different society, a better society, once this war is over, and we can heal the wounds and create a better place for all of us and for our children. I have 2 kids. They're going to come back to Israel in about 7 months when we finish our posting year. And despite the fact that I'm very fearful to the fact that we are at war and there are so many threats around us that we have to tackle, I'm also very optimistic about the future of the country.
Well, we miss you here in Israel. We are glad that you're there representing us so proudly. And you stay safe, keep representing us with pride. And thank you so much for being a friend of Stand With Us, always being part of our programs whenever we call on you. And thank you so much for being with us today. May God protect you and your family and keep you safe in Baku. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Michael. And I salute you and Stand With Us in everything you do. Your work is so important, especially these days.
Thank you, George. Be well. Now, tensions are not just high here in the Middle East, but in communities and specifically on campuses around the world. To discuss this, I'm thrilled to welcome my colleagues, Director of the Stand With Us Sadov Legal Department, Yael Lerman, and Executive Director of the Emerson Fellowship and Campus Affairs, Rena Nasar-First. Thank you both for being with us at what I know is a very busy time right now. So let's get straight into it. Tell us what you've been seeing on university campuses since October the 7th and how you're responding to these events, both in the US and worldwide. Rena.
Michael, it is no exaggeration to say that university campuses have become battlefields for students. In the immediate aftermath of October 7th, college campuses erupted in a horrifying wave of anti-Semitism. And those incidents include hateful demonstrations, calls for resistance by any means necessary, walkouts and protests, vandalism and targeting of Jewish spaces, bias and bigotry from professors, and even physical violence. As this activity is escalating, the messaging is changing. We started out in the aftermath of October 7th with justification for what happened, almost that Israel brought it upon itself. Now what we're seeing are accusations of genocide and calls to action against Israel. Jewish, Israeli, and pro-Israel students are facing an increasingly hostile atmosphere that's threatening their safety, and it's threatening their ability to participate in campus life. Many are afraid to go to class. They're afraid to leave their dorms. They're afraid to walk around campus. And there are administrators and campus police who are failing to adequately respond to these incidents. So students are feeling incredibly vulnerable and isolated right now. But it is in moments of crisis like these for which our organization was born, to make sure that students aren't fighting these battles alone, because we are on the front lines with them. Since October 7th, my department, the campus department, along with the legal department and many other departments that stand with us, have responded to almost 500 requests for incidents. And we are active on over 300 universities right now. To give you a few examples, at Indiana University, a student who was reporting anti-Semitic graffiti at his a nearby police department was photographed for doing so, and his information was leaked online. He was the victim of cyberbullying and harassment on social media for days, and the administration and police failed to act. We are providing the student with legal support and helping him pursue justice for the cyberbullying that he faced. At UMass Amherst, at a Shabbat dinner where there was an empty table display for the hostages, a Palestinian student confronted the display, physically attacked a Jewish student and a Hillel professional, and returned with a knife to cut up an Israeli flag and make violent gestures at the students. As this was happening, Stand With Us staff was on the phone with students all throughout the night and all throughout the next day to make sure that police were called, that there was an arrest, and making sure that the community felt safe in the aftermath of that incident. Even at University of Michigan, and these are one of many examples that we're navigating, students are mobilizing, and we're supporting them in response to what will be a school-wide vote on a question of whether to condemn Israel for alleged war crimes. Before we're even getting to that vote, Friday night, 40 students were arrested for physically storming the administration building to get to the president. If this is the climate before a vote like this is allowed to happen, one can only imagine how things are going to escalate as this question is introduced to the student body. We are focusing on empowering hundreds of activists to stand up to this dangerous activity, to mobilize and respond. We're helping them understand where campus policies are violated, where there's actionable misconduct, not just in the US, but in all countries where Stand With Us is active. For example, in South Africa, at certain protests, students have found ISIS flags being waved at those protests. In the Netherlands, there are targeted attacks at Jewish homes, ripping of mezuzot and targeting of those homes. We are working, especially on the campus front, to make sure that every student is getting continuous, well-rounded support from multiple departments to make sure that they're not alone in navigating this and that they have tools and an organization in their corner to help them combat this activity.
So important. Yeah, what have you seen on the legal front since October the 7th?
So as Rena said, we are seeing an overwhelming increase in legal intake. To give a sense of numbers, before October 7, in a given year, we would generally see about 270 separate requests for legal help come into the Stand With Us legal department. So 270 in a year. In contrast, since October 7, so the last few weeks alone, we've received nearly 450 separate requests for legal help. This is coming from students from kindergarten through 12th grade in high schools. This is coming from college campuses, and this is coming from community members, including workplace issues. It is overwhelming. I've never seen anything like this. It's an entire avalanche of need for legal help. And I can say that every single one of these incidents that we are working on, and we work on every single one that comes, we don't drop any. No other groups are working on them. These are unique to Stand With Us's legal hotline. So when you look at that in the aggregate of what Stand With Us is doing, and then you think of, other legal hotlines as well, the need for legal help in this country right now is tremendous. So looking at the 450 requests for legal help that we alone have received since October 7, one thing that I believe makes our legal team unique is that we bring a holistic approach to every case that comes in. We never have to tell anyone that this doesn't necessarily rise to the level of a lawsuit or a legal claim, and therefore we can't help you. If a case comes in and there is a legal claim, we will put all of our resources to bear on it, including all of our in-house legal staff and our hundreds of pro bono attorneys from around the country that have signed up to help. But if there isn't necessarily a legal response, then Rena and her campus team or our high school team or all the many resources at Stand With Us will go and help that student or that complainant to give them an empowering solution so no one walks away feeling like there was nothing they could do to fight anti-Semitism and support Israel. Let me give one example of this, of how we bring all our resources to bear in any one given case. So this is an example from just this last week alone. This past week, UC Santa Barbara, which is a university campus in California, the students there wanted to bring a resolution to their student government condemning Hamas. So this might seem like a no-brainer to all of us that a student government should condemn Hamas. It's actually quite courageous for the students to bring this. And it was by no means a given that this vote would pass. It's one of the only universities to even consider a vote condemning Hamas right now. So as the Jewish students prepared to bring this to the student government, they first met with one of the remarkable campus managers who works for Rena and the campus team. And she prepped them for 3 hours with talking points and bullet points on how do you bring a resolution like this and talk about Israel. After those 3 hours, when they actually started bringing it to the student government and providing testimony, protesters came, anti-Israel protesters, and blockaded the Jewish and Zionist students in a room. They could not get out. There was full disruptions. On the scene, our campus manager was there in the room with the students, guiding them and helping them along with other Jewish professionals from campus. At that time, a disruptor came and assaulted one of the Jewish students who was trying to record what was happening. Immediately, our campus manager got me on the phone, and I was sitting there counseling her. How do you get the police involved? How do you make sure there's an arrest? How do you get the identifying information of the student? All the different steps that need to take place, because one thing we will discuss later is one of the biggest problems we're seeing right now is that campus police are not protecting Jewish students to the extent we would like to see. And as the students were blockaded in the room, unable to provide testimony, with faculty advisor at UC Santa Barbara not allowing police to come in to protect the Jewish students and not stopping the disruption, what did our campus manager help do? They got all the Jewish students in a circle, and the Jewish students, we have a wonderful video of this, singing Hatikva, singing Am Yisrael Chai, staying proud, not being coward. What was the end result? The end result is that the resolution condemning Hamas passed by 73%. The assailant who attacked the Jewish student was identified, and a police report was taken, and repercussions are being taken against that student. And the Jewish students and Zionist students on campus feel proud and supported through the work of the Stand With Us campus and legal department.
Incredible and so important and empowering. And obviously for each one of these stories, there are so many more. And you mentioned our global work, Rena, and I know they've seen over 1,000 students in the UK taking part in programs there in Stand With Us UK, and of course in Brazil and in many other places as well. I have a question. Is this rise in anti-Semitic activity, is it different to what we've seen in the past? And if so, what's changed?
Based on our years of expertise and experience in this field, I would say that the delegitimization efforts we're seeing are not new. The underlying sentiments are not new. What is new are the tactics. Some new tactics, some old tactics, but combined, we're seeing an accelerated momentum in this activity where anti-Israel activists feel more emboldened than ever before. And their activity has become vicious, it has become violent, and it is unapologetic in its roots in Jewish hate. Very much so, very clear. We have heard and we have seen this rhetoric before, calling for intifada from the river to the sea. But right now, what we are seeing is how these actions are materializing, how these words are materializing into dangerous action, where Jewish, Israeli, and pro-Israel students and faculty are being targeted, intimidated, harassed, and physically attacked. I also want to add that this is not only happening to Jewish and Israeli students, but it is also happening to Zionists of different religious backgrounds who are also being targeted by this activity. For example, Stand With Us has, within our campus department, a tremendous Christian outreach program, and our Christian student leaders are facing anti-Semitism in standing in solidarity with Israel on their campuses. We are fighting this escalation by doing what we do best, but in greater volume, in more hours, spending more hours doing what we do best. And that is utilizing every resource possible, as Yael said, to help students fight bigotry in the classroom, to confidently negate false claims and educate their peers, to combat hate in person and online, and most importantly, to build communities of support on campus for Zionists and allies. And we're seeing our efforts cumulatively and collectively garner and yield incredible results, like at Columbia with the suspension of SJP and JVP. And we need more of that.
Absolutely. Yael, how is this situation now different from before?
I think we're in a totally different paradigm. We have moved from, let's say, the last 10 years since the Stand With Us legal department was founded. Pretty much every case that came in involved discrimination or harassment of Jewish, Israeli, or Zionist ally students. We are now in a different paradigm where a huge number of our intake involves criminal threats, terroristic threats, physical assaults. So we've moved into a different level of escalation against Jewish students and Zionist and Israeli students on campuses. We're seeing it in person and social media, and it's worrisome. It's also much broader than just campus. I know we're focused on campus now. I want to reiterate, we're seeing this in K through 12. We're seeing this in the community. So just a few examples. We have people reporting to us, asking for legal help on a vast variety of things, including direct messages to their social media accounts saying, we're coming for you. You have a choice to flee or die. We help them then report it to the police and to hate crimes and make sure it's being investigated. One big problem we're seeing in America is that police do not necessarily know how to identify what is anti-Semitic, what is an attack against someone because of their Israeli national origin or because they are Jewish, which falls into a protected group status. And then when they are attacked for that status, a hate crime charge is added to the charge. They're not adding the hate crime charge. They're saying that when someone gets a text message, I'm coming to behead your baby, as we have received intake about, that is a political statement. And so one of the jobs of the legal department is to help university administrators in charge of reviewing bias and discrimination harassment complaints, and to help police departments understand that when someone is being targeted specifically because they are a Jew or an Israeli or a Zionist ally. That is not political speech. That is not protected. And it has to be investigated under the right lens. So I'll give you two very brief examples. One is a university student affiliated with StandWithUs as a fellow received a harassing text by a fellow student. She didn't know, of course, who it was initially, but she had posted something positive about Israel, and she received, as a result, harassing statements directly to her social media account. She immediately reported to the university. This happened to be a good university in that they do take anti-Semitism seriously there. The school immediately issued a no contact order against the student harassing her, determined that the student had a history of harassment, and now the student faces possible expulsion from the university. And the student has received tremendous outpouring of support from the university. How did the student know to report this text? Because she received training from the StandWithUs legal department on what to do if you are targeted because you are a Jew in many different aspects. It could be in the classroom, it could be on social media, it could be walking down the street. What to do if that happens. She knew what to do. She took care of it immediately. And as a result, we're seeing repercussions for the perpetrator of the crime. Different example of the types of just next level threats that our students are receiving and having to deal with is a student reported to us on a Friday afternoon that police officers from campus police showed up at her door and told her she to immediately vacate the premises because an unknown person had lobbied a complaint with the university that she was threatening to hurt Muslim students on campus. They didn't provide the name of the person who made the report. They didn't tell her exactly what it was that she was allegedly threatening people with. They just said, you have to vacate the premises immediately. And this is just a few days after October 7, high tensions for Jewish students on campus. They moved her immediately to off-campus housing with no security or protection where she was all alone. She reached out to StandWithUs. And as we do in every case, we are there for the student 100% of the way. From a support perspective, our campus manager and our regional director were there for her almost immediately. And from a legal perspective, we reached out to our pro bono attorney network. We found a litigator for her in that city to consult with her that very day. And first thing Monday morning, there was a demand letter sent to the university. The lawyer walked with the student into the administration to demand that due process be had here and that justice occur. And within days, the student was back in her dormitory. The roommate who had falsely made the accusations against her was kicked out. So when students know to report, when they know that they can be empowered using the law, and when they reach out for that help from StandWithUs, we are 100% there for them, and we have success and we have victories.
Amazing. And Rena, you've been head of the campus department for StandWithUs for over a decade now. Just tell us a little bit about the department's reach and some of the things that you're involved in year round.
We, within our team, have field professionals who are based in regions all across the country and around the world. And these field professionals are, of course, trained by StandWithUs to support students. They also often have their own experiences as student leaders. So they are providing emotional support for students on campus today, helping them talk through what is happening, what they're experiencing, and what actions they can take. We are really proud to say that together in supporting students, we've organized over 300 Israel rallies and demonstrations and programs. We've led 130 different StandWithUs briefings and workshops for college students. We've distributed thousands of fact sheets, counterpoints, pamphlets, and other educational materials. And as Yael alluded to with the example of Santa Barbara, we're physically on the ground with the students. So they are physically not alone, and they are emotionally not alone. And through all these efforts, we've engaged over 50,000 students. And that is just in the US. The numbers around the world are even higher. We have prestigious leadership programs like the StandWithUs Emerson Fellowship that train and prepare college students to deal with these very moments of crisis, to help them identify how anti-Semitism manifests on their campuses and the actions they can take to lead and advocate for their communities and fight for a better, safer climate for students of all backgrounds. We're seeing these Emerson Fellows and over 1,000 alumni take action in incredible and important results and yield incredible and important results. At University of Florida, we helped our Emerson Fellow organize an Israel rally that was attended by over 1,000 students. At Michigan State University, after there was a display on the Jumbotron during a sports game, a trivia question about Hitler that was incredibly traumatizing and triggering for the Jewish community, we organized a mega challah bake with the athletics department. And we hosted Eliza Canner, former Emerson Fellow, New England Patriots cheerleader and Jewish activist. At University of Buffalo, when there was an anti-Israel speaker coming to campus, we helped students with counterpoints. We helped them understand who the speaker is and exactly the problematic and hate-filled messages they're sharing. And those students confidently got up, asked questions during the program, and basically through those questions had unraveled every bit of hate that speaker had tried to push and portray on campus. Even around the world, as we mentioned earlier, we're combating similar activity. We're empowering these student leaders, our Emerson Fellows in South Africa. We're opening the fellowship in Australia. These are student leaders who are understanding the importance of standing strong right now, unwavering in who they are and what their communities should be, the access to campus life that they should have. And we're standing with them in doing that.
Amazing. And Yael, you founded the legal department in 2014. So how has your department been impacted in general? And tell us some of the things you're doing in general, apart from the current conflict.
So as I mentioned, we're now at almost, I think, a little over 450 legal incident intake since October 7th. So we are slammed. We are working on every single one. We are expanding our legal team, bringing in new litigators, expanding our pro bono network so that we have the capacity to respond to every single one in the way in which it needs to be responded. I'd like to, divide it up into the various things that we're doing because we are operating on so many levels like never before. There's the individual ground level, local level, there's the state level and the federal level. And of course, I'm only speaking for our work in the United States. So on the ground level are all the stories I've just told. UC Santa Barbara, the dorm room student, the student who's getting doxxed and harassed on her campus. All the individual levels, we're helping every single one of those students as if it is the only case in the universe. Because each time we help and empower a student on campus, an entire world is broadened and a student is empowered and it impacts their identity. Plus, there's justice. There should be justice in each one of those cases. There's also the legal ground level work that needs to be done in order to initiate state and federal action. So anytime a student comes to us, and it's possible, we are initiating discrimination complaints, filings at the university itself generally it's with the bias or DEI offices. And those discrimination complaints, we help the students file the complaints. We sit with them in the hearings. We sit through the whole process of the investigation. We also help them with the criminal justice system if they need to go and now start prosecuting. That's the local level. On the state level, we are trying to hold universities accountable where they are refusing to enforce their own rules. So for instance, we sent a demand letter to George Mason University after we found out through our amazing partnership with Chabad on campus that a Jewish student was assaulted. The perpetrator was known and the campus police were refusing to make an arrest. The Jewish student in that case was at a frat party. He was attacked, his Jewish star ripped from his neck, anti-Semitic slurs were hurled at him. The police know about it and have done nothing to our knowledge. They have not even reported it as a hate crime as they're required to do under federal law. There's protests happening on campus with students masking to conceal their identity. That is against Virginia state law. Under Virginia state law, there's KKK laws that say you are not allowed to mask to conceal your identity. The university has done nothing about that. And there's multiple things happening. We have a letter available online that says all these things. So we brought it first to the university ignored us. Then we brought it to the Attorney General of Virginia, who on Thursday just issued a directive to all universities in Virginia laying out all the things in our letter saying that he is requiring compliance with Virginia state law. That's the state level. And that's a direct result of the letter we sent and also sent to the Attorney General in Virginia. And then there's the federal level. We already have 3 complaints filed with the Department of Education Office for Civil Rights on campuses that have had egregious anti-Semitism. We are right now in the process of preparing several more. So Stand With Us is operating on every possible legal level in the United States to fight back against the current rise in anti-Semitism, the local level, the state level, and the federal level. So stay tuned. And thank you for your support to everyone listening, because without your support, we couldn't, of course, engage on all these different legal fronts at the same time.
Absolutely. And obviously we give local legal advice in our chapters around the world so that students there can also know their rights and act accordingly. Final thoughts then, Rena, final thoughts for our audience, for students who are watching and also their parents and family.
There are some serious attempts to intimidate and silence pro-Israel students, pro-Israel voices in general. There's a tremendous amount of gaslighting that's happening, not only in our open and vocal support for Israel, but also our demand for action against anti-Semitism. But Stand With Us is utilizing every outlet possible to amplify student voices, to make sure that they are louder and more visible than ever before, and that we're advocating for them. If you are a student watching, if you are a parent watching, if you're an alum watching, whatever connection you might have to a university, please know that there are ways that you can get involved with our work, support our efforts, and thanks to those who already have. We've seen good momentum, and like I said earlier, we need more.
Absolutely. And Yael.
I would say that one of the biggest problems we're seeing on campuses right now is the failure of university administrations to enforce their own policies, and the failure of campus police to make arrests and to hold perpetrators accountable when they attack Jewish students. So that's going to be one of the things that Stand With Us' legal team is going to work on addressing, and to stay tuned on that. And then the other thing I would like to say to students, parents, anyone out there listening is be empowered, be proud, and hold people accountable when they are haters. The only way we can work is through your partnership. Report the crimes, reach out to us. We are here for you. And I guess one last story to just leave for everyone is stay tuned for this week. You're going to hear about a remarkable student at UC Berkeley who is holding the police accountable there with Stand With Us' help. And we are going to try to start changing the tide. So I think there's a lot of hope. And I think that we're going to start seeing, hopefully, that through the work of Stand With Us' legal team and many others out there, that we are fighting back and we are empowered and proud.
Such vital work. Please extend out thanks to your incredible teams operating all over the country and all over the world, doing such amazing and important work. And thank you both. Of course, you can contact our campus and our legal departments via standwithus.com. Yael and Rena, thank you so much for joining us and for all that you do. And if you want to support this fight against anti-Semitism and the proud support for Israel, then you can make a donation to Stand With Us. And by the way, it gets doubled because Giving Tuesday is coming up next week after Thanksgiving. Our website is live and ready to double your donation. So you can go to standwithus.com/Giving Tuesday. That's standwithus.com/Giving Tuesday. And every donation you make will be doubled in the run up to Tuesday next week and throughout it after Thanksgiving. Thank you so much for your support. We could not do this without you. And in the UK today, a large vigil turned out outside Downing Street, Christian allies particularly turning out in force to support Israel and the Jewish community. In France this week, more than 100,000 people took part in a demonstration to stand against anti-Semitism. And meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., close to 300,000 people took part in a powerful rally. The March for Israel was the biggest pro-Israel gathering in U.S. history. Were you there? Well, maybe you'll be here. Take a look.
The U.S.-Israel relationship is not just a Democratic or Republican value. It's not just a progressive or conservative value. It is an American value encoded in our national DNA.
I am Anila Ali. I stand before you as a Muslim American Pakistani, friend of the Jewish people. I stand here as a Latina immigrant. We stand here united, proud, as Americans who are going to fight back against terror, who will fight back against anti-Semitism everywhere.
We have indeed made history today, with over 290,000 of us gathered here on the National Mall.
partnership with my community's local JCRC, I worked with the group of students to engage our school district superintendent to build a plan to combat anti-Semitism and protect Jewish students.
A beautiful sight, a historic day. Don't forget you can find rally information for where you are, plus all the latest resources, updates, videos, and more at our Situation Room. Go to standwithus.com/Situation Room. If you're watching in America, happy Thanksgiving. It's coming up, and we'll be hosting a Thanksgiving dinner here at the Stand With Us Center in Jerusalem for lone soldiers, Americans who've come to serve in the IDF in partnership with the Michael Levin base. And I'll take you behind the scenes of that special event next week. Meanwhile, we send our love to our Israeli troops and to our brothers and sisters and allies worldwide. Thank you for joining us. Yisrael Chai.